In the early morning of January 24th, 1848, a cold mist hung over the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The small settlement of Coloma was nothing more than a few wooden shacks and the steady hammering of a sawmill that stood along the American River. James W. Marshall, a carpenter hired by the Swiss immigrant John Sutter, bent over the water channel that ran beside the mill. His boots were wet, his fingers stiff from the winter chill. The sawmill wheel creaked with each turn, sending a rhythmic splash of water onto the stones below. Marshall's eyes narrowed. Something at the bottom of the channel caught the faint morning light, a flicker like sunlight trapped in a raindrop. He bent down and scooped it up. It was a small, irregular piece of metal, yellow as the midday sun. He turned it in his palm. It was heavy for its size. He rubbed it against a nearby rock. The streak left behind was bright and untarnished, gold. That he didn't shout. He didn't dance. He simply stood there, staring at the lump in his hand, aware that the world, though it didn't yet know, had just shifted on its axis. Part 2. Rumors in the wind for weeks. Marshall tried to keep the discovery quiet. Sutter feared that if news spread, his land would be overrun by strangers, lawless men chasing fortune. But secrets like gold cannot be buried. By spring, the whispers had spread beyond the valley, riding the wagons and steamships like wildfire. San Francisco, at the time, was a small town with fewer than 1,000 residents. Within months, its docks were crowded with ships arriving from Mexico, Chile, Peru, and the east coast of the United States. Sailors deserted their vessels, farmers abandoned their fields, clerks and craftsmen closed their shops, all chasing a single promise: gold. They called them the 49ers for the year 1849, when the rush reached its fever pitch. Men came on horseback, by wagon, and even on foot, trekking through deserts and over snowbound mountains to reach California. Part 3. Our characters arrive. Among them was Daniel McGrath, a 23-year-old from Boston. His hands were calloused from years of shipbuilding, but his pockets were empty. The newspaper in his city had screamed the headline, "Gold found in California," and he'd made up his mind the same night. There was also Miguel Torres, a Mexican miner who had already worked silver veins in Sonora. For him, gold was not a fantasy, it was a trade. But he had heard that the gold in California lay in rivers, waiting to be picked up by anyone with a pan and patience. And finally, Leewi, a young Chinese man from Guangdong, fleeing famine in his homeland. He boarded a ship with nothing but a bundle of clothes and a small jade pendant from his mother. The three men would not meet until months later, but their fates were already being pulled toward the same river, the same dust, the same dream. Part 4. Boomtowns and broken men. By the time Daniel reached San Francisco, it was hardly the same town described in guidebooks. Streets were muddy rivers, buildings went up overnight, and gambling halls and saloons outnumbered churches. Prices were outrageous. A single egg cost $1, and a shovel could cost more than a month's wages back east. The gold fields themselves were no better. The rivers sparkled, yes, but mostly with the sweat of men digging, shoveling, and cursing. Miguel arrived early enough to stake a claim along the American River, while Leewi worked as a cook for a mining camp, saving every coin until he could buy his own tools. The rush was not all hope and prosperity. Disease spread quickly. Fights broke out over claims. Law enforcement was scarce, and sometimes the only rule was the gun on your hip. Yet, every morning, the men still rose, trudged to the water, and began again. Because gold was there, maybe not for you today, but maybe tomorrow.